Hello and welcome to Louise Singleton Creations. I have always wanted to learn how to throw pots on a potter's wheel, but so far I've never had chance to do it. It's on my bucket list. I absolutely love ceramics and the beautiful effects you can get with the glazes. But as I've said, I can't do that just at the moment. But I can do the second best thing and use what I already have. So in today's video, I'm going to be using Aqua Cast to cast my pots instead of making my own ceramic pots. And then I'm going to be using epoxy resin instead of a ceramic glaze. So let's see if I manage to get the same kind of beautiful ceramic look using Aqua Cast and resin, because that's what I really want to learn to do. To make my first jar, I decided to use Aqua Cast texture from Elichem Resins. When you demould pieces made with Aqua Cast texture, you get a beautiful, smooth, visual texture. But you can also sand it to create a physical texture as well. So it's nice and rough but beautiful at the same time. And it was that roughness that I thought would contrast well against the smooth shininess of the resin, which I'll be adding afterwards to create that glazed look. Well, that was the plan anyway. If you know me by now, you'll know that things don't always go according to plan. But anyway, this is the first jar in the journey. So after measuring out the water and the Aqua Cast texture powder, I gave it a really good mix and then began adding it to my mould. So the mould I'm using today is actually the jar part of the pear jar mould. So this is from Let's Resin and it comes with a lid, and with the lid on it looks like a pear. But without the lid it's just a beautiful shape, it's just such a nice shaped jar, and I really like it without the lid. And so yeah, I'm just using that part of the pear jar mould today. So I will be making 3 jars today, but I'm only going to be showing you the whole process of the jar making with this first one, because I don't want you to get bored and I don't see the point in showing you the same thing 3 times over. So for this one, as I've already said a couple of times, I'm using Aqua Cast texture, but for the other 2 jars, I'm just going to be using the original Aqua Cast, which is nice and smooth, and I will be pigmenting those jars. This one, I'm not adding any pigment because I quite like this kind of Aqua Cast in its natural form. When you're filling your moulds with this, it's best to do it a little bit at a time and keep giving the mould a good squeeze, especially around the bottom, which will be the top. You don't want any pockets of air trapped in there, so it's good to give it a good squeeze and a pat on the sides and bang the table and all those things that make the air bubbles and air pockets rise to the top. After an hour of curing, it was time to take it out of the mould, and I absolutely love this Aqua Cast texture. Look how shiny that is, and do you see at the bottom it's not as bubbly and rough as normally you would get with a casting compound. I don't know why, but you get a much smoother effect all over, and you can see that texture as well, can't you? All the little speckles in there. It's kind of like an eggshell effect. So it's beautiful as it is, but I am actually going to be sanding it to make it rough. I like to wet sand it, so I've just got a bowl of water here and a sanding block, and I'm just sanding away until it gets nice and rough. It's kind of the opposite, isn't it? Normally you sand something to make it smooth, but yeah, it's the opposite way around with this. You can actually acid etch it as well with, I think, white vinegar. That works well, but yeah, sanding is just as good. And I don't know if you can see, I'm trying to show you here that the contrast between the bit that I've already sanded and the bit that I haven't, but hopefully you can see the difference, and yeah, it really is quite a difference. Okay, so here it is, all dry, and it's a lot paler, isn't it now? When it's fully cured and dried, it's a lot paler, but yeah, that's ready now. It's going to go on the cup turner, and because of the shape of it, I didn't want the resin that I'm going to be putting on there to be kind of going down the slope and onto the sponge of my cup turner, so I'm kind of making a barrier. Yeah, I suppose that's the best word for it, a barrier. I'm just spreading out some glue smoothly onto some acetate and then putting the jar upside down onto the glue while it dries. And I wasn't quite patient enough to wait for it to fully dry, but it was stuck to the jar, and that was what was most important. So as you can see there, I've just cut around it in a circle, and now I just need to get my knife and cut out the circle from the middle. Then it was ready to go on the cup turner, and as you can see, the sponge is a lot bigger than the cavity in the jar, which is a good thing because that means it's going to be nice and secure. I just had to give it a good squeeze and coax it into there, and then just twist the jar and, squeeze the sponge at the same time until it just kind of screwed onto the cup turner. I suppose that's the best way to describe it. And yeah, then it was really, really secure, which I was happy about. So the resin I'm going to be using today is J. Dixon's Fast Cure resin. And I chose that one because it needed using up. Any fast cure resin will be good. It doesn't even have to be a fast cure resin, but I have found that it is better for this process because it's thicker and obviously it cures faster, so it's less time on the cup turner. So yeah, a fast cure resin is recommended for using with a cup turner, but not essential. I'm using green and brown and gold as my colours today, so I've just got a small amount of each colour and I'm just adding the pigments. Actually, I've mixed up much more resin than I needed. I did, 1.5 ounces of part A and 1.5 of part B, and it was too much. I would recommend possibly just 1 ounce of each part would be better, or even less than that. You don't want to be wasting your resin, but anyway, I mixed up the pigments and it was ready to go onto the jar. Okay, let me tell you what my plan was, what the vision was that I had in my mind. So, I don't know if you've seen them, but there's a style in ceramics where they glaze the top and they allow the glaze to kind of drip down, but just a little bit. It's just a little bit drippy. And it's on the top part, so the bottom half is kind of raw, if you like, and the top half is glazed with this beautiful glaze that's dripping down just slightly. And yeah, that's the vision I had in my mind for this, and that's why I chose the textured Aqua Cast for that beautiful contrast. And yeah, it didn't actually go quite as I planned, but it turned out great for other reasons, so we'll get to that later. So that's why I'm just adding the resin to the top of the jar here, and I'm doing it very carefully, but in the end it didn't really matter whether it was careful or not because it did all mix together in quite a nice way. But yeah, don't worry about having a real steady hand and all of that. Just try, if you're having a go at this, just try not to get resin on the part of the jar where you don't want resin. But everything else, it doesn't matter about how you apply it. It will all mix together. So I left it about an hour and a half of, the turning. And I had to decide when to take the jar off the cup turner and stand it up for the resin to drip down just a little bit, like the ceramics that had inspired me. Yeah, well, I didn't quite estimate the timings right. And you'll see what happened in just a moment. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the whole sponge off the cup turner rather than taking the cup off the sponge. Obviously the resin is still not cured, and I didn't want the barrier to be pulling off the jar and causing problems. I wanted to take the barrier off when it was fully cured, so that's why I left the sponge on. So let's see what happens. Oh dear. Well, I said I was going for drippy, didn't I? And it was definitely drippy. It dripped all the way down and created quite an interesting look, but not the look I was going for. So this is sped up 4 times faster than it actually happened, so you didn't have to sit and watch. But yeah, it wasn't as quick as it looks like it was, but it still dripped down all the way to the bottom. So I've cut out all the cleanup because I've got 2 other jars to show you, but this is how it looked after I'd finished cleaning it up and after it had fully cured. And I actually quite liked the effect, but I didn't like the contrast. It was just, with that white background, it was just standing out too much, and to me, it just didn't look quite right. So in the end, I decided to paint over it. So I needn't have bothered with the textured Aqua Cast because we're not going to see it, but never mind. I had a plan for painting it because I wanted to use the same colours that I'd used in the resin. I decided to try adding the pigment powders that I'd used in the resin to my HydroFlow sealer, which is for the Aqua Cast, and you get that also from Elichem Resins. So I'm just pouring out a little bit into my paint palette and mixing the pigment powders into the HydroFlow, the same powders, like I've already said, that I used in the resin. And of course you could just use acrylic paint, but I had this idea in my mind and I wanted to try it out. The powders mixed into the sealer really easily, and I especially liked the gold that I managed to get using that gold pigment powder. You get such a strong gold, even better I think than you would if you used gold acrylic paint, so I was really happy about that. And you can add as much or as little powder as you like depending on how thick or thin you want your paint to be. And then once you've mixed it, just paint it on however you want to paint it. I kind of wanted it darker in the middle of the section and gold around the outside. So that's what I'm doing there. I'm going to skip all the painting, otherwise the video will be like 3 hours long because I've got so much to show you. But yeah, as you can see, it's quite simple, just painting each section brown and gold to try and get the picture that was in my mind, the new picture, not the original picture. I already knew that wasn't going to happen. But yeah, if life gives you lemons, you've got to make lemonade, haven't you? That's the way I was thinking. I nearly ended up putting it in the bin when I realised I didn't like it. And I thought, no, I can't do that. That's wasteful. And I've already filmed the video. I've got to keep going. And so, yeah, I made lemonade with my lemons and it turned out pretty good. Let's have a look. And so here it is back on my cup turner, all painted, and all I've done is added some clear resin. I don't know what's happened to my video footage, but I don't have the footage of me putting it on the turner and adding the resin, but you know, I don't think you need to see that. You can see what I've done. It's just the fast cure resin again. I decided I wanted it all covered in resin, and that's what I'm doing here. But yeah, you can see how the painting has really changed the way it looks, hasn't it? The contrast isn't as much, and it all kind of looks like it was always supposed to be that way. So we'll have a proper look at that all finished at the end. Let's get on to the second jar. So this time we've skipped the process of making the jar. I'm using the white gold pigment powder from Laura's Art Corner, because that's a beautiful colour, along with, I think I used brown, the same brown as before, which was a chocolate brown from Arteza. And for the jar, I've just used the original Aqua Cast, and I kind of over pigmented it. I was using autumn bark from Homeware Designs to pigment the Aqua Cast, and I really wanted it to be dark, and I added too much pigment. And when you over pigment your Aqua Cast, you can end up with quite an interesting effect, which I've got here. As you can see, it's quite patchy, but for what I'm going for, I love it. I love the patchiness. It helps to give you that kind of stoneware look, and that's what I was going for. So I was happy about the pattern not being even. But I did make a bit of a mess there, and I had to clean it up. But so I'm trying the same thing again with this one, and yeah, I got it better this time because I left it for longer. And once again, I've sped it up quite a lot, which doesn't really matter too much because half the time my hand's in the way of the camera and you can't see what I'm doing. But I did like the colour that I got with the brown and the white gold. It did work nicely. So after a while of sitting there watching it turning round and around and getting a little bit dizzy and mesmerised, I had this idea to have some gold just at the bottom where it's dripping down. That was what I wanted, and so what I decided to do was shake some gold which I had in a little shaker bottle, just the same pigment as I used when mixing the resin. It's just a gold pigment. To shake it onto the Aqua Cast and just gently blow it onto the wet resin so that it would just stick at the bottom. And yeah, so I'm just using my heat gun here to just blow it gently onto the resin, and hopefully you can see that I just got a small amount of gold on there at the bottom. Gold can tend to take over, and even this small amount did get a little bit carried away with itself. So this time I think I left it about 3 hours, and yeah, I turned the cup turner off to see if there was much movement in the resin before actually taking the jar off the cup turner. Don't worry, you'll see it in a second. And yeah, I was ready to quickly put it back on the cup turner if I needed to. So I was watching it really carefully, and I didn't like the shape that it was starting to form. It was kind of what I wanted, but too kind of, is bulbous the word? It was kind of bulging a bit. Do you know what I mean? There was just something about the shape it was forming that I wasn't quite happy with. So what I decided to do was take it off the sponge and turn it upside down onto a cup and let the resin flow back down the other way. And when I did that, I got some really pretty patterns forming in the resin. Do you see, as the gold's going down, that gold that I added is kind of going down in nice patterns. So yeah, that's what I did with that one. Right, let's do the last one. So I've made an Aqua Cast jar again. This time it's a bit paler, not quite so much pigment in there. And this time I decided to paint it with the, when I used the paint on the first one, I made my own paint with the powders and the Hydroflow sealer for the Aqua Cast. I wanted to do that again because that kind of inspired me. So this time I made up the 3 colours, still the same colours as before, the green, the brown and the gold, because I wanted this to be a set. So I'm keeping the colours the same. And I thought, let's see what happens if I paint it on while it's on the cup turner with a brush to make some stripes. Now, the thing you will probably see quite quickly is that I had my jar wonky. From where I was sitting, I couldn't see how wonky it was. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't see how wonky it was until I took the jar off the cup turner and saw that the stripes were not how they should have been. They were very skew-whiff, we say here. Don't know if you say that where you live, skew-whiff. It might be a Yorkshire term. But here in Yorkshire we say skew-whiff or wonky, and it was very skew-whiff. But never mind. I still liked how it turned out. And if you look at it from the right angle, it's not too bad. You know, with your head on the side a little bit. I think if I do this again, what I will do is I will stand the jar on a turntable and kind of draw a line on it, a level line with a pencil. You know, if you put your pencil on something and hold it still while it's touching the jar that's going round on the turntable, you'll get a level line. And then if you have a level line on your jar before you start painting, you can make sure you stick to that, can't you? If your jar isn't straight on the cup turner. But anyway, never mind. I still liked the finished result. After the paint had had an hour to dry, I added some resin. Because this was going to be part of a set, I wanted it to, you know, it needed to not be too different. Already with the stripes it's different. So I thought, you know, the other two have got resin on, this one needs resin on. So I just added the same resin as before to the striped area, and yeah, that's all I needed to do. This was the easiest of the 3 jars. You'll see all 3 jars in more detail very soon. But before that, I just wanted to add a finishing touch to the bases of my jars. As you may already know, I now have the Xtool F1 engraver, and I wanted to engrave some stainless steel discs with my logo on to go on the base. The idea was to put the discs inside another disc of cork, but I had trouble cutting the cork and ended up using leather because I had some offcuts of tooling leather. So I made that ring of leather on my Cricut Maker, and it's got a hole in the middle that perfectly fits the logo disc, and I thought it would give it a real touch of something special. I know you're not going to see it, but when, you know, you pick the jar up and you turn it over and see the leather and the steel on the bottom, it gives it a feel of quality, so that's what I wanted to try out. And the glue I'm using is the glue I use so much. I love it. It's E6000 Plus, and I just added it to the leather and the metal and added that to the Aqua Cast jar. And here presto, we have a very special finishing touch to the bottom of the jar, and I did that to all 3 of them. I decided I wanted the rim of the jars to be gold, and I used my chrome marker, gold chrome marker, that's from Resin, just to colour the top. Not sure in the end whether it was necessary. Yeah, I kind of like it with the gold on, but anyway, we do tend to get carried away, don't we? So here is my finished set. The first one, which went completely wrong, actually ended up looking really good. It's possibly I think it's my second favourite. I think my favourite one is the middle one. And funnily enough, the reason I like the middle one the best is the pattern I got on the Aqua Cast by adding too much pigment. I just love it. It really looks like stoneware to me. And yeah, I think I've kind of managed to get that glazed ceramic effect. What do you think? With the added touch of luxury with the leather and steel on the bottoms, I think that finished it off very nicely, and I'm happy with them. So there was all sorts going on in this week's video, wasn't there? And I hope you've learned something from it, because I learned loads in the process of making this video, and so it was very useful to me. I will leave links and discount codes to everything I've used in the video description. And if you've enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up please, and subscribe if you would like to. And that's it for this week. I will see you again next time. Thank you for watching, and bye for now.